Welcome back to another Bartok dev vlog. I mentioned in a previous video that I wanted to give some kind of answer to some of the things that I have as a vision for Bartok, or what does Bartok do, or what is Bartok. This is the video for that. So without further ado, let's just get started. Trying a few things differently this time, trying to zoom in on the text a little bit and walk through in that way. And in the background, if you listen really closely, there's actual Bartok music playing. I learned about Bartok by naming this solution Bartok, just trying to educate myself and other people. Anyways, like I said, let's get started. So Bartok does things that other services do, and because of that, someone could think that Bartok actually is one of those things. And in fact, Bartok may actually be fairly decent at being one of those things. However, it's not exactly one of those things, and that's not necessarily the sole vision for it. Feel the tension building. This is actually some of his more listenable music. So let's consider the rest of this exploration of what Bartok is or could be, and I'll put a subtle note on that. Some of these, someone may not actually mistake Bartok for that, but I feel like it really defines the vision to say what this thing is not, or where it's taking inspiration for. Expiration. All right, so Bartok, on first blush, someone could look at Bartok and say, oh, well, it's basically like someone's cloning VS Code or Atom or whatever. Editors typically allow you to change files, save files, and they have syntax highlighting. And if you look at any particular UI, you could just be like, oh, yeah, that's obviously an editor. Bartok is not one of those. It copies off of those, but it's not exactly one of those. That's not what the whole entire vision is. Have you ever seen the sites like Plunker, CodePen, JS Fiddle? These sites let you pop code in, run it, and share it with people. The thing is those are mainly front end. There are some exceptions to these kind of sites, and some of those are actually like full solutions. One of those is Jupyter Notebook. I really like what you can do with Jupyter Notebook. In fact, I try to replicate that with my Broken Clock application or document. Basically, that was a document where I set up a scenario of like, hey, how many times has the clock been broken in a day? And I tried to use a web page to kind of describe, through JavaScript, like how a clock could be broken more than once or twice a day. Anyways, all of these things allow people to run code in a web browser, and that's kind of cool, but it's not exactly what Bartok is. And I'll make a fine point on that. Those pieces of code, or those services, are there to allow sharing of code, and I have much more interest in deploying code. So you could look at Bartok in some future iteration and be like, oh, well, this is basically just doing what RunKit or Plunker or CodePen is doing. And even further iteration, you might say, oh, well, this is just doing what Jupyter Notebook does. But I say no, because of deployment. So let's look at other things that do deployment. Jenkins, TeamCity, Bamboo, CircleCI, Travis CI. These are all based around the idea that you can set up a particular flow for your code, so that whenever your code gets checked into a particular place, some system runs in the background, builds it, tests it, and then decides whether or not it should actually go to production. Yep, gonna have some of that in there, and it's not quite there yet, but just wait and see. But that's not the whole point of this. It is part of it. Here's something you may have not heard about: ALM, which is Application Lifecycle Management. There are tons of solutions for this particular branch of software or services, and a lot of them I don't even know about. Maybe other people know about. I've said the name ALM before and people recognized it, but to me, it's like a fledgling kind of software, and it's also a software that you have to like kind of sell people on the idea of it. Basically, the idea is everyone in your organization takes part in this software development life cycle. So from the very start, when you get requirements or you build requirements, there's software to help you with that. That same exact software helps you all the way through the development life cycle, all the way to the end when you've actually deployed the code in production, and basically helps you monitor it at that point. I'm not going to provide examples of this, and I will say that like I do intend to do part of what that software is doing, but maybe not the largest part of it, like to the extent that it attempts to do lifecycle management. There's also the tail end of that, that's application performance management, and people are probably used to that. APM, they refer to it, and each of these solutions here don't fit squarely into APM, but they serve a use case that managers, developers, architects all kind of need, and they do it in a particular way, and Bartok will probably do things a little bit different than that. To start first, I've spoke about Weave Scope in previous vlogs. I have not spoken about Splunk, Datadog. I've talked a little bit about Kubernetes, but not the Kubernetes dashboard. Kubernetes dashboard is like, hey, you can deploy Kubernetes without having this dashboard. The dashboard's a separate thing. It's basically just shows you what your services are up to and what your cluster is doing. There's also Elk Stack, and that's Elasticsearch, which is basically the data store. Logstash, which is the thing that listens to your services, and Kibana. Kibana is basically something a lot like Splunk, but a little bit more visual. They have just a different kind of take on it. There's also an EFK stack that I heard about, but I forgot what the F stands for. Anyways, that's application performance management. Basically, while you're in production, it's telling you, hey, this particular service is doing sort of a bad thing, or it's doing well, or you got 100 hits to this particular endpoint, and it's doing that through having like an agent or having something listening to the logs that you have, and sort of pulling this together in like a big picture. Sometimes there's an agent and it's not doesn't actually involve logs or whatever. Anyways, that ties in with ALM in the sense that like there's a monitoring of this software after you've released it into prod. And this other one I'll probably have to make a separate video on. This is XaaS. It's basically X as a service, just so you name it. Like we have here software as a service, functions as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. You can read them. Anyways, the SaaS solutions, this is like one of the granddaddies of this particular acronym, AAS. SaaS is like, hey, instead of installing the software on your computer, we'll have it on as a service somewhere. You can log into this, or you can hit this API, and you'll get what we give to you as a service, and you just pay for it, and you'll pay for maybe what you use, whatever different pricing models. That's SaaS, and that's kind of cool because it means that you don't have to manage your own infrastructure. You can basically just use this service over here. I'll jump back to functions as a service, but I want to first go into maybe like platform as a service, and then talk about containers as a service. So platform as a service is like, instead of just giving you this software as a service, I'm going to give you a whole platform that you can build software on, and that's pretty cool. That's like kind of like the next step of SaaS. And I'll tie all this back into Bartok after I get done reviewing this. So then we have a later model, which is sort of like containers as a service. You just bundle up your application into a service, and you deploy it into this infrastructure that I provided for you, and I'll help you manage that orchestration, and I'll help you manage the containers. So Kubernetes kind of falls into that. I've heard people say it's also PaaS, but that's kind of the world we live in now. There's also infrastructure as a service, but I'm not going to go too far into that one. And then let's talk about like functions as a service. Functions as a service. All of these AASs basically are striking a balance somewhere between like control and ownership. So you can have control of everything, and you can just host that on your own hardware, or you could go to the cloud with one of the other solutions, and basically how much control do you want to give up, or how much control do you want to take, and then for that control, how much complexity do you want to pay for. Function as a service is sort of a newer entry into this whole AAS cloud of as a services. And basically the idea behind it is that you give me a function in a well-known language and write it to my platform, and I'll just run that service for you whenever a network request is made to your function, and I'll treat that as a service. I'll handle all the DevOps in the background. I'll handle all the container orchestrations and all that, and I'll give you reliability. And all you'll have to do is worry about the function. Except you'll have to also worry about the fact that it takes a little while to spin this up, and also I'll charge you when the function is running, and then we'll have sort of like a model of like how much how much do you want to pay for this particular thing, and when do I consider it actually running, and how am I going to charge you for it. So there's still debate about like function as a service actually being cheaper. It's sold to you because it's like hey, you only get charged when it's running, and I'll give you a report that shows how many times it ran, but then you may still actually wind up paying more. So let me tie all of this in with Bartok. Bartok could actually just be hosted on your own hardware. It could be hosted on your own cloud infrastructure. It could be hosted using containers. It could be hosted by some software provider in the cloud, and it could be given to you as a SaaS solution. There's not a lot of statement in Bartok about what amount of control or command, or what kind of price you're going to pay for the complexity here. But I'll tell you the sweet spot that I'm aiming for. I want a function as a service that functions pretty much like a little bit of each one of these. Containers as a service, you could actually have these functions running in containers. You could set up a service that is going to be deployed onto your own hardware, or onto Amazon hardware, or on Amazon VMs, Amazon FAS, whatever. There's no opinion here about that. What I want to do is enable like some of that complexity to go away, and you can have a choice in whatever direction you want to go. So anyways, that's kind of where Bartok fits in with all these. The last one's a little bit cloudy. Get the joke? Cloudy. But it's not completely built out yet, and I don't have a ton of an opinion about it. Right now, people could look at this Bartok and say, oh, well, it's just an editor. As this gets developed, it'll be more obvious what all of these things, where Bartok follows with all these. And that's pretty much it.